15 minutes. That's how long it took Ghost 9 to do the impossible. 12 Navy SEALs trapped in the Valley of Death. 50 Taliban fighters closing in for the kill. 1A, 10 Warthog with barely enough fuel to make it home. What happened next broke every rule of physics, every principle of aerial combat, and every limit of human possibility. Military experts still can't explain it. This is the mission that made Sarah Martinez a legend. This is Tracelight Stories, where real life meets karma. Recap. If you're just joining us, this is episode 3 of the Ghost 9 files. Sarah Martinez, the girl they called Crash Martinez at flight school, had just become the first woman to graduate top of her class at Nellis. Now she was deployed to Afghanistan, flying the most dangerous close air support missions in the war. It was October 15th, 2019. Sarah's A-10 Thunderbolt was cruising over the Hindu Kush Mountains when the call came in. SEAL Team 6 was pinned down in the Karangal Valley, the same valley where more aircraft had been shot down than anywhere else in Afghanistan. Ghost, this is SEAL Team Leader Morrison. The radio crackled. We are taking heavy fire from all directions. We have wounded. We need immediate close air support. Sarah looked at her fuel gauge. 20 minutes of combat time, maybe less. The Taliban positions were dug in, well defended, and dangerously close to the SEAL team. Morrison, Ghost copies. I see your position. This is going to be close. Ghost, we don't have a choice. If you don't help us, we're all dead. Sarah took a deep breath and pushed her A-10 into a steep dive. What happened next would defy explanation. The impossible begins. The Karangal Valley stretched below like a death trap. Steep ridges on both sides, perfect for ambushes. The Taliban had been using this terrain for decades to destroy American aircraft. Sarah's heads-up display showed the tactical situation. 12 green dots representing the SEALs, clustered on a rocky outcrop. Surrounding them, at least 50 red dots, Taliban fighters with RPGs, machine guns, and surface-to-air missiles. Ghost, we've got SAM sights at your 2 o'clock and 10 o'clock. Morrison's voice was strained. They're locked onto you. Sarah saw the missile launch signatures on her threat display. 2SA, 7 missiles streaking toward her A-10. Standard procedure was to climb, deploy chaff, and evade. But that would take her away from the SEALs. Instead, Sarah did something that should have been impossible. She dove straight down, using the valley walls to mask her heat signature. The missiles, confused by the terrain, exploded harmlessly against the mountainside. Jesus Christ, Ghost. Morrison shouted. How did you do that? Sarah didn't answer. She was already lining up her first attack run. The A-10's 30mm cannon, a weapon so powerful it could destroy tanks, was about to speak. But the Taliban positions were less than 100 meters from the SEALs. One mistake, 1 degree off target, and she'd kill the men she was trying to save. Ghost, danger close. Danger close. Morrison called out, using the military term for friendly fire risk. Sarah's finger hovered over the trigger. In her headset, she could hear the SEALs' desperate radio chatter. Ammunition running low. Wounded men crying out. Time running out. She squeezed the trigger. The A-10's cannon fired 3,900 rounds per minute. Each depleted uranium shell could punch through armor like paper. Sarah's burst lasted exactly 2.3 seconds. 149 rounds that had to be perfect. The Taliban position erupted in smoke and fire. When it cleared, 15 enemy fighters were gone. The SEALs were untouched. Ghost, that was surgical. Morrison's voice was filled with awe. How did you thread that needle? But Sarah was already banking for her second run. 45 Taliban fighters remained, and they were all shooting at her now. Defying physics. What happened next has been studied by military tacticians for years. Sarah's A-10 began moving through the valley in ways that defied the laws of aerodynamics. The A-10 Thunderbolt is not a nimble aircraft. It's built like a flying tank, slow, heavy, designed for straight-line attacks. But in Sarah's hands, it moved like a fighter jet. She rolled inverted, diving between the valley walls with less than 50 feet of clearance on each side. Taliban fighters on the ridges couldn't get a clear shot. She was moving too fast, too unpredictably. Ghost, you've got multiple RPGs inbound. Morrison warned. Sarah saw them, rocket-propelled grenades streaking toward her from 3 different directions. Physics said she couldn't avoid them all. The valley was too narrow, her aircraft too big. But Sarah had stopped thinking about physics. She was thinking like the mountains themselves. She pulled her A-10 into a vertical climb that should have stalled the engines. Instead, she used the valley's wind patterns, updrafts she had studied obsessively during her deployment, to carry her aircraft higher. The RPGs passed beneath her, exploding against the valley walls in a cascade of fire and rock. Impossible, one of the SEALs whispered into his radio. That's physically impossible. Sarah's second attack run was even more precise than the first. 20 more Taliban fighters disappeared in perfectly placed cannon fire. But she was burning fuel at an alarming rate, and the enemy was adapting. Asterisk Ghost, they're coordinating their fire. Ghost 9, Bagram Tower. Did you say 12 souls? Your aircraft is single seat only. Bagram Ghost 9, confirmed 12 souls. We had to get creative. The flight back to base was a white-knuckle nightmare. The overloaded A-10 flew like a brick, barely maintaining altitude. Sarah had to use every trick she'd learned, every updraft and wind current, just to keep them in the air. Ghost, fuel warning light is on. One of the SEALs reported, reading her instruments. I know, Sarah replied calmly. We're going to make it. But privately, she wasn't sure. The math was brutal. Fuel consumption with the extra weight, distance to base, headwinds, everything was working against them. Bagram Tower, Ghost 9 is 5 miles out. Fuel critical. Requesting emergency vehicles standing by. Ghost 9, emergency crews are in position. You are cleared for immediate landing. Sarah lined up her approach, fighting to control the unstable aircraft. The runway appeared ahead, safety, salvation, home. That's when her engines quit. Both of them. Simultaneously. Complete fuel exhaustion. Mayday, mayday. Sarah called out. Ghost 9 is going down. Engines out. Attempting dead-stick landing. The A-10 became a 30,000-pound glider, carrying 13 lives. Sarah had one chance, one approach, no second chances. She brought the aircraft down in a perfect dead-stick landing, touching down on Bagram's runway with no power, no fuel, and no margin for error. The A-10 rolled to a stop, just as emergency vehicles surrounded them. 12 Navy SEALs climbed out of an aircraft designed for one. Sarah Martinez, Ghost 9, had done the impossible. Ghost, Morrison said as they stood on the tarmac. I don't know how you did it, but you just saved 12 lives with an empty fuel tank and a prayer. Sarah looked back at her battered A-10, then at the 12 men she'd pulled from certain death. Just doing my job, she said quietly. The mission report filed that day was classified at the highest levels. 15 minutes of combat that defied physics, saved 12 lives, and created a legend. But Sarah Martinez's story was far from over, because 3 weeks later, she would receive orders that would change everything. Orders that would take her from the mountains of Afghanistan to the corridors of the Pentagon. Orders that would reveal the real reason she had been chosen for the Ghost program. What Sarah discovered in those classified files would shake her faith in everything she believed about her military service. And it would put her on a collision course with the most powerful people in Washington. This is Tracelight Stories, where real life meets karma. The truth always finds the light, even when powerful people try to bury it in the dark. Next week, Episode 4, The Ghost Files, What They Never Told Sarah Martinez. Subscribe now, because you won't believe what happens next.